the second that exposes you. It's not what people do to you that destroys your power. It's the exact second you react. Most people spend their lives trying to control situations, outcomes, other people's opinions, but they ignore the only place where real power exists. That silent, almost invisible gap between what happens and how you respond. That gap is where you either build authority or destroy it. Think about it carefully. No one needs to defeat you publicly if they can provoke you privately. No one needs to expose your weaknesses if you reveal them yourself in a moment of irritation. A single reaction, poorly timed, emotionally charged, uncontrolled, can undo years of discipline, reputation, and perceived strength. And the worst part is that it rarely feels like a mistake in the moment. It feels justified. It feels necessary. It feels like you are defending yourself, protecting your dignity, standing your ground. But in reality, you are stepping exactly into the trap that was set for you. Because every reaction is information. Every emotional response is data. It tells people what affects you, what bothers you, what you fear, what you cannot control. And once someone understands that, they don't need to overpower you. They just need to press the right buttons. Marco Aurelio wrote in Meditações, Livro 2, Paragraph 1, that you will encounter difficult people constantly, but he reminds himself that their behavior is not what defines him. This is where most people fail. They allow external behavior to dictate internal instability. They let someone else's actions rewrite their state of mind in real time. That is not strength. That is dependency. The person who reacts instantly is not in control. The person who needs to answer everything, justify everything, respond to every provocation is already playing a game they cannot win. Because they are no longer choosing their actions. They are being pulled by them. Observe the pattern. Someone criticizes you and you rush to defend yourself. Someone disrespects you and you feel the need to respond immediately. Someone misunderstands you and you try to correct them at all costs. And in each of these moments, you are not acting from clarity. You are acting from impulse. An impulse is where power dies. There is a reason why the most respected, feared, and admired individuals in history shared a common trait. They were slow to react. Not because they were passive, but because they were deliberate. They understood that the first reaction is rarely the most intelligent one. It is simply the most emotional one. And emotions, when exposed without control, reduce your perceived value instantly. Not because emotions are wrong, but because uncontrolled emotions signal vulnerability in environments where perception defines power. This is why reacting quickly is dangerous. It creates a pattern, and patterns can be studied. Once someone recognizes how you react under pressure, they can predict you. And once you become predictable, you become easy to manage, easy to provoke, easy to destabilize. That is how power is lost without noise, without confrontation, without you even noticing it. Understand this with absolute clarity. The moment you react without thinking, you are no longer leading your life. You are responding to it. And there is a massive difference between those two states. One builds authority, the other destroys it. And here is the truth that separates those who are respected from those who are ignored. Power is not about what you say when everything is calm. It is about what you do in the exact second when something tries to disturb your balance. That second reveals everything. And if you fail in that second, nothing else will save you. Now there is something even more subtle and even more dangerous that most people have been taught to believe. The idea that expressing everything you feel is a form of strength. In the next part, you will understand why that belief is quietly destroying your control, your image, and your power. The illusion of expression. When being authentic makes you weak. You were taught that expressing everything you feel is a form of freedom. That being authentic means saying exactly what is on your mind, reacting without filters, exposing your emotions in real time. It sounds honest. It sounds courageous. But in reality, most of the time, it is neither. Because not all expression is strength. Most expression is exposure. There is a difference between knowing what you feel and needing everyone else to see it. The first is self-awareness. The second is lack of control. And the world you live in does not reward uncontrolled honesty. It studies it, measures it, and uses it. When you say everything you think, when you react to everything you feel, you remove the most powerful layer of protection you have. You become transparent, easy to read, easy to anticipate. And once people can anticipate you, they don't need to confront you directly. They can guide your behavior without you even noticing. This is why many people who believe they are real are actually predictable. They wear their emotions openly, they react instantly, they show exactly what affects them. And while that may create the illusion of sincerity, it also creates a map of their vulnerabilities. And anyone who understands human behavior knows exactly how to use that map. Look around carefully. The people who hold real influence are not the ones who speak the most about what they feel. They are the ones who decide when to speak, how to speak, and what to keep for themselves. They understand that not every truth needs to be expressed immediately. Not every emotion deserves a reaction. This is not repression. This is discipline. Proverbios capítulo 29, versículo 11, teaches that a fool gives full vent to their spirit, but the wise quietly hold it back. This is not about silence for the sake of silence. It is about control for the sake of power. Because when you express everything, you give away leverage. You show your position too early. You reveal your strategy before the game even begins. And from that point forward, you are no longer shaping the interaction. You are reacting inside a structure someone else can already see. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't express themselves because they are strong. They do it because they cannot tolerate the tension of holding something inside. They need immediate relief. They need to release what they feel. And that need is exactly what makes them easy to manipulate. The person who cannot hold silence cannot hold power. Think about how many times you felt the urge to respond immediately, to clarify, to defend, to explain, to correct. That urgency feels important, but it is rarely strategic. It is emotional pressure disguised as necessity. And the more you obey that pressure, the more you train yourself to react instead of choose. This is where control begins to erode. Slowly, almost invisibly, you stop deciding your responses. You start releasing them. And once that pattern is established, you are no longer acting with intention. You are acting with habit. And habits, especially emotional ones, are predictable. That is why this illusion is so dangerous. It convinces you that you are being yourself, when in reality, you are giving away the very thing that defines your strength. Because true authenticity is not about exposing everything. It is about mastering what you choose to reveal. And once you understand this, you begin to see something deeper. This constant need to react, to express, to release is not just a habit. It is an addiction. The invisible addiction, the need to react. What feels like a natural response is often a trained dependency. You think you are choosing to react, but in most cases you are being pulled by a pattern your brain has learned to crave. Every notification, every disagreement, every moment of tension triggers something deeper than logic. It activates a cycle of stimulation and release. You feel something, you respond, you get relief, and that relief becomes addictive. This is how the mind traps itself, not through weakness, but through repetition. The more you react, the more your brain associates reaction with control. But it is a false sense of control, because if you truly had control, you would be able to choose not to react. Most people cannot. They feel the urge to answer immediately, to correct someone, to defend their image, to prove a point, and if they resist, they feel discomfort. That discomfort is the signal of dependency. It shows that the reaction is no longer a choice. It has become a need. This is why silence feels so difficult for many people. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack tolerance for emotional tension. They cannot sit with what they feel without releasing it. And once someone else realizes that, they gain access to you. Because all they need to do is create the right emotional trigger, and you will complete the cycle for them. You will react, you will expose yourself, and you will believe it was your decision. This is how control is transferred without force. Epicteto teaches in Enchiridion Capítulo 5 that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. But what most people fail to understand is that those judgments happen instantly when the mind is untrained. They are automatic, and anything automatic can be exploited. If your reactions are automatic, your behavior is predictable. If your behavior is predictable, your position can be manipulated. And manipulation does not require intelligence from the outside. It only requires a lack of awareness from within. Notice how easily people are pulled into arguments online, how quickly they respond to criticism, how urgently they try to correct misunderstandings. It is not about truth. It is about the need to react. They are not engaging. They are feeding a pattern. And every time they do it, the pattern becomes stronger. This is why reacting to everything slowly drains your power. Not because of the reactions themselves, but because of the dependency they create. You stop acting with intention. You start acting with compulsion. And compulsion is the opposite of control. The most dangerous part is that this addiction is socially accepted. It is even encouraged. People praise quick responses, emotional honesty, immediate engagement. But what they call authenticity is often just lack of discipline. Because the person who truly has control does not need to react instantly. They can pause. They can observe. They can choose. And that choice is what separates those who are driven by the world from those who shape it. Now understand something even more strategic. If your reactions can be triggered, they can be used against you. And there are people who understand this perfectly. The power game. Whoever makes you react controls you. Power is rarely taken by force. It is transferred through reaction. You don't lose control in the obvious moments. You lose it when someone provokes you and you respond exactly how they expected. That is the moment the dynamic shifts. Not because they are stronger, but because they have accessed something inside you that you failed to guard. Understand this clearly. The person who can trigger your reaction can dictate your behavior, and the moment your behavior is dictated, your position is no longer yours. This is why the most subtle forms of manipulation are never loud. They are quiet, precise, and intentional. A comment that questions your value. A look that challenges your authority. A situation designed to make you uncomfortable. None of it is random. It is observation followed by execution. People study reactions. They test boundaries. They say something small and watch how you respond. If you react emotionally, they learn where you are exposed. If you try to defend yourself immediately, they learn where you seek validation. If you become aggressive, they learn where you lack control. And once they gather that information, they no longer need to guess. They can guide you. Robert Greene explains through the Law of Power, number 33, that discovering each man's thumbscrew allows you to turn him at will. Most people think manipulation requires intelligence or strategy, but in reality, it only requires patience and observation. Because most individuals expose their own weaknesses freely. They react when they are criticized. They react when they are ignored. They react when they feel disrespected. And each reaction is a signal, a confirmation, a doorway. And once someone knows which door to open, they don't need to force their way in. This is why the strongest individuals are difficult to read, not because they hide everything, but because they control what they reveal. They do not offer immediate reactions. They do not provide instant feedback. They create uncertainty, and uncertainty disrupts control. If someone cannot predict how you will respond, they cannot manipulate you easily. If they cannot manipulate you, they cannot position themselves above you in that moment. But the opposite is also true. If your reactions are fast, emotional, and consistent, you become easy to handle, easy to provoke, easy to lead without realizing it. You think you are defending yourself, but you are following a script someone else has already written. This is the hidden hierarchy of power that most people never see. It is not about who speaks louder or who appears stronger. It is about who controls the emotional direction of the interaction. And in every interaction, there is always someone leading and someone reacting. The one who reacts loses. This does not mean you should never respond. It means your response must be chosen, not triggered. It must come from clarity, not pressure, from awareness, not impulse. Because the moment you react automatically, you hand over something valuable. You give away control without realizing it. And once that pattern repeats, something even more damaging begins to happen. People stop seeing you as stable. They start seeing you as emotional, unpredictable, and easy to destabilize. And that changes everything. The social cost, how your reactions destroy your image. People do not remember everything that was said. They remember how you behaved. You may believe that being right is enough, that if your argument is correct, if your intention is justified, your image remains intact. But that is not how perception works. Perception is not built on logic. It is built on emotional impact. And nothing shapes that impact faster than your reactions. One moment of visible loss of control can erase months, sometimes years, of carefully built respect. Not because people are unfair, but because they are constantly evaluating stability. They are asking a silent question every time they observe you. Can this person be trusted under pressure? When you react impulsively, the answer becomes uncertain. You may not notice it immediately. No one will announce it to you. There will be no direct confrontation, but something shifts. Subtly, quietly, permanently. The way people listen to you changes. The weight of your words decreases. The authority you once carried begins to weaken, not because of what you said, but because of how you delivered it. Seneca reflects in Letters to Lucilius, letter 78, that the greatest strength is not in avoiding difficulty, but in maintaining composure within it. This is where most people fail. They believe strength is shown through intensity, through passion, through immediate response. But true strength is measured in restraint. When you react emotionally, you communicate something beyond your words. You show that your internal state can be shaken, that your balance depends on external conditions, and once that becomes visible, people adjust their behavior around you. Some will begin to test you more often, others will stop taking you seriously, and the most perceptive ones will simply step back, recognizing that your presence no longer carries the same weight. This is how reputation erodes, not through one major mistake, but through repeated moments of uncontrolled reaction. Think about individuals you respect deeply. Rarely is it because they speak the most or react the fastest. It is because they remain composed when others lose control. They hold their position when pressure rises. They do not rush to explain themselves, to defend every point, to respond to every provocation. And because of that, their presence becomes solid. Now consider the opposite. The person who reacts to everything, who answers every comment, who defends every criticism, who tries to control every misunderstanding. At first it may appear as confidence, but over time it reveals insecurity, because the need to react constantly signals dependence on external validation, and dependence reduces authority. This is why people with true influence do not feel the need to respond to everything. They understand that not every situation deserves their energy. Not every opinion requires their attention. Not every challenge needs to be accepted. They choose when to engage, and that choice is what preserves their image. Because image is not built by constant action, it is built by selective action. The less you react impulsively, the more intentional your presence becomes. And the more intentional your presence, the more people begin to perceive you as stable, controlled, and difficult to shake. That perception is power. But there is something even more powerful than controlled reaction. The ability to not respond at all. Silence as a weapon. The power of not responding. In a world where everyone feels the need to answer, explain, and react, silence becomes rare. And what is rare gains power. Most people cannot remain silent when provoked. They feel an internal pressure to respond, to clarify, to defend their position. That pressure feels urgent, almost necessary. But in reality, it is not urgency. It is lack of control. Because the moment you feel that you must respond, you are no longer choosing. You are being driven. Silence breaks that pattern. When you do not respond immediately, you interrupt the expected flow of interaction. You remove the emotional fuel that the other person was counting on. You create a pause, and within that pause, something shifts. The other person begins to question. They expected a reaction. They prepared for it. They anticipated your defense, your explanation, your emotion. But when it does not come, they are left without direction. And uncertainty is uncomfortable for those who seek control. This is why silence is not absence. It is presence without exposure. It communicates something that words cannot. It shows that you are not easily moved, that you are not pressured into action, that your behavior is not dictated by external stimuli. Marco Aurelio reinforces in Meditações, Livro 4, Parágrafo 3, that the mind becomes stronger when it turns inward and refuses to be disturbed by what is outside. Silence is the practical expression of that principle. It is the visible sign of internal order. But understand this clearly. Silence is only powerful when it is intentional. There is a difference between silence that comes from fear and silence that comes from control. One avoids confrontation, the other transcends it. One is passive, the other is strategic. When your silence is chosen, it sends a clear message. You are not obligated to respond to everything. You are not available for every conflict. You are not affected by every attempt to provoke you. And that message reshapes how people interact with you. Those who seek to manipulate will hesitate. Those who test boundaries will become uncertain. And those who observe will begin to respect the fact that your reactions are not easily accessed. This is where presence is built. Because true presence is not created by constant communication. It is created by controlled communication. By knowing when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. Think about how often people lose their position simply because they spoke too soon. They tried to explain themselves before understanding the situation. They reacted before observing the full context. They filled the silence out of discomfort, and in doing so, they exposed more than necessary. Silence protects you from that. It gives you time. Time to observe, time to understand, time to decide. And decision is where power resides. Without silence, there is no space for decision, only reaction. And reaction is immediate. It is impulsive. It is exposed. Silence, on the other hand, is controlled. It is deliberate. It is precise. This is why those who master silence become difficult to read. And those who are difficult to read are difficult to manipulate. But there is one force that constantly pushes you to break that silence. One internal voice that insists you must respond. That voice is not logic. It is ego. The trap of the ego, the need to have the last word. You do not react because the situation demands it. You react because your ego cannot tolerate being challenged. That voice inside you that says you must respond, must correct, must prove your point, is not your strength. It is your vulnerability disguised as certainty. It convinces you that silence is weakness and that speaking is power. But in most cases, the opposite is true. The need to have the last word is not about truth. It is about control over perception. It is the desire to win, not to understand. And when winning becomes your priority, you stop acting with clarity and start acting with urgency. Urgency is where mistakes happen. Think about how many times you continued an argument long after it stopped being productive. Not because there was something left to resolve, but because you refused to let the other person win. That is not strategy. That is ego seeking validation. And ego, when unchecked, will always push you into reaction. Because it cannot accept being ignored. It cannot accept being misunderstood. It cannot accept not being recognized. It demands visibility. It demands response. It demands closure, even when closure is unnecessary. This is why the ego is one of the easiest points of manipulation. All someone needs to do is question your value, challenge your authority, or misunderstand you intentionally. If your ego is in control, you will feel compelled to respond. You will step into the interaction trying to restore your image. And in doing so, you give them exactly what they wanted. Epicteto reminds in Enchiridion Capitolo 20 that if someone speaks ill of you and it is true, correct yourself. If it is not, ignore it. But most people cannot apply this principle. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack discipline over their ego. They feel the need to respond even when no response is required. This is where power is lost silently. Because the person who needs to defend their image constantly does not possess it, they are trying to maintain something that is not stable within themselves. And that instability becomes visible through their reactions. True authority does not argue for its position. It embodies it. The strongest individuals do not need to prove they are right in every situation. They do not engage in every disagreement. They do not chase the last word. They understand that not every battle deserves their presence. And more importantly, they understand that some battles are designed to pull them down to a level where control is lost. When you refuse to engage in unnecessary conflict, you are not avoiding, you are selecting. Selection is power. Because every time you choose not to respond, you preserve your energy, your clarity, and your position. You refuse to be dragged into emotional exchanges that serve no purpose other than feeding someone else's need for reaction. And over time, something changes. People begin to realize that you are not easily provoked, that you do not respond to every challenge, that your attention is not available on demand. And that creates distance. Not distance in connection, but distance in access. And access is what gives people influence over you. The less accessible your reactions are, the harder it becomes to move you. But there is a consequence that goes even deeper than ego-driven reactions. The more you react, the more you reveal a pattern. And patterns can be studied, predicted, and used against you. Reaction is a strategic weakness. You become predictable. Every reaction you repeat becomes a pattern, and every pattern becomes a weakness. You may believe that reacting is natural, that it simply reflects who you are. But what you fail to see is that repetition turns behavior into code. And once your behavior becomes code, it can be read. The moment someone understands how you react under pressure, they no longer need to guess your next move. They can anticipate it. If you always defend yourself when criticized, they will criticize you. If you become aggressive when challenged, they will challenge you. If you seek validation when ignored, they will ignore you. Not randomly, but strategically. Because they know how you will respond. This is how control operates beneath the surface. Not through force, but through prediction. And prediction only exists when patterns are visible. Robert Greene teaches through the Law of Power number 48 that true power lies in formlessness. When you cannot be defined, you cannot be controlled. But the moment your reactions become consistent, you lose that formlessness. You become structured, readable, manageable. And once that happens, your freedom decreases without you realizing it. Think about it carefully. The strongest position in any interaction is unpredictability. Not chaos, but controlled unpredictability. The ability to respond differently than expected. To remain calm when pressure rises. To stay silent when others anticipate your reaction. This disrupts the other person's strategy. Because when your behavior cannot be mapped, it cannot be manipulated. But most people do the opposite. They react the same way, over and over again. They follow emotional patterns that feel familiar. They defend, attack, explain, justify, and each time they do it, they reinforce the same structure. They become easier to read, and being easy to read is dangerous, because once someone can read you, they can position themselves ahead of you. They can guide the interaction, control the rhythm, dictate the outcome, and you will believe you are participating freely, when in reality, you are following a script. This is why emotional discipline is not just about self-control. It is about strategic positioning. When you control your reactions, you control the information you reveal. When you control the information, you control how others perceive you. And perception shapes behavior. People act differently around those they cannot predict. They hesitate. They observe more. They become cautious. And in that caution, your influence increases. But when you are predictable, the opposite happens. People become comfortable testing you. They know how far they can go. They know what will trigger you. They know how to move you. And once they know that, your position is no longer stable. You are no longer leading the interaction. You are responding within it. This is the hidden cost of reacting to everything. You slowly give away your unpredictability. You trade it for immediate emotional relief. And in doing so, you reduce your strategic value. Because power is not only about what you do, it is about what others cannot foresee. And when nothing about you is uncertain, nothing about you is feared or respected at a deeper level. But all of this points to something even more fundamental. The real battle is not happening outside. It is happening within you. Inner dominion, the real battlefield. You think the problem is out there. The people, the situations, the disrespect, the misunderstandings. But none of that is the real battlefield. The real battlefield is internal. Because every reaction you give is not caused by the event itself, but by how you interpret it. Two people can face the same situation, hear the same words, experience the same tension, and respond in completely different ways. The difference is not in the event, it is in the mind, and the untrained mind reacts. It reacts because it seeks immediate meaning. It reacts because it wants to protect identity. It reacts because it cannot tolerate uncertainty or discomfort. But in doing so, it creates the very instability it tries to avoid. Marco Aurelio writes in Meditações, Livro 6, Parágrafo 52, that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this estimate, this internal judgment, is what most people never learn to control. They believe they are reacting to reality. In truth, they are reacting to their interpretation of reality. An interpretation is shaped by fear, ego, past experiences, and unconscious patterns. This is why someone can look at you in silence and you feel disrespected. Not because they said anything, but because your mind filled the gap. This is why a simple message without tone can create tension. Because your interpretation assigns meaning where none was confirmed. And once that meaning is accepted, the reaction follows. This is where control must begin. Not in suppressing reactions, but in questioning the process that creates them. You must learn to observe the moment before the reaction, that brief instant where your mind tries to assign meaning. If you do not control that moment, everything that follows is automatic, and anything automatic can be exploited. Because when your internal world is unstable, the external world does not need to do much to move you. A word, a gesture, a delay, a tone. Small things become triggers, and those triggers dictate your behavior. This is why the strongest individuals invest more in mastering themselves than in controlling others. They understand that the only domain where absolute authority is possible is within. And once that authority is established, external situations lose their ability to disturb. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you become selective. You choose what deserves a reaction. You choose what deserves your energy. You choose what deserves your attention. And more importantly, you recognize what does not. This is the foundation of internal dominion. Without it, every external force becomes a potential influence. With it, external forces lose their power to destabilize you. And when that happens, something changes in the way you move through the world. You are no longer reacting to life. You are directing your position within it. But there is still one final layer that separates those who understand this from those who truly live it. Because knowing is not enough. There is a code, a way of operating that defines those who hold real power. The code of the strong, how the powerful really operate. There is a difference between knowing these principles and living by them. Most people understand, at least intellectually, that reacting too much is harmful. But understanding does not create power. Execution does. And those who operate at a higher level follow a different code. They do not react by default. They evaluate, they observe, they delay. Not because they are slow, but because they are precise. They understand that every action carries weight, and that weight must be placed intentionally. This is what separates controlled individuals from reactive ones. The reactive person seeks immediate resolution. They want to answer quickly, respond instantly, close the loop as fast as possible. But the powerful individual is comfortable leaving things unresolved for a moment. They allow space. They allow silence. They allow tension to exist without rushing to eliminate it. Because they know that clarity comes after observation, not before. Seneca reflects in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 13, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The untrained mind reacts to imagined threats, to perceived disrespect, to interpretations that may not even be accurate. But the trained mind pauses, it questions, it waits, and in that waiting, it gains advantage. The strong do not feel the need to prove themselves constantly. They do not explain their position to everyone. They do not respond to every challenge. They do not chase validation through reaction. They move differently. They understand that their value is not determined by how quickly they respond, but by the quality of their response. And sometimes the highest quality response is no response at all. This is discipline at a higher level. Not forced silence, not suppressed emotion, but chosen action. Every word, every reaction, every engagement is filtered through awareness. They ask themselves silently, does this deserve my energy? Does this move me forward? Does this strengthen my position? If the answer is no, they let it pass. This is what creates stability. Because when your actions are chosen instead of triggered, you become consistent in a different way. Not predictable in behavior, but predictable in control. People begin to understand that you are not easily moved, that you do not react under pressure, that your presence remains steady regardless of the situation. And that steadiness creates authority. Robert Greene emphasizes through the law of power number 34 that you must act like a king to be treated like one. But acting like a king is not about arrogance, it is about self-possession. It is about not lowering your standards of behavior based on external noise. It is about maintaining your internal order even when everything around you tries to disturb it. This is the code. You do not react because something happens. You respond because you decide it is necessary. You do not engage because you are provoked. You engage because it aligns with your intention. And once this becomes your standard, something shifts. People stop trying to provoke you, not because they cannot, but because it no longer works. They realize that your reactions are not accessible, that your behavior cannot be easily influenced. And when that realization happens, your position changes. You are no longer part of the emotional flow. You are above it. But there is one final truth that most people overlook. Sometimes the most powerful response is not action, it is the absence of it. Breaking expectation, sometimes not reacting, is the strongest response. There are moments where silence does not just protect you, it defines you. Most people expect a reaction. They expect emotion, explanation, defense, or retaliation. It is almost automatic in human interaction. When something happens, something must be said. When someone speaks, someone must respond. But power begins where expectation is broken. Because expectation is control in disguise. When people expect you to react and you do not, you remove their ability to predict you. And when prediction fails, influence weakens. The situation no longer follows the script they unconsciously prepared. Instead of confirmation, they encounter uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable for those who depend on control. This is why not reacting can feel more powerful than any verbal response. It creates a psychological imbalance in the interaction. The other person is left without feedback, without validation, without emotional confirmation of their attempt to provoke you. They are forced to sit with their own projection, and that changes the dynamic completely. Epicteto teaches in Enchiridion Capitulo 12 that it is not events that disturb people, but their judgments about events. But there is an additional layer most people miss. When you refuse to react, you interrupt the automatic judgment cycle in the interaction itself. You refuse to participate in the emotional exchange that was being constructed. And in that refusal, you reclaim control. Think about how rare it is for someone to remain composed when they are clearly being challenged. The natural impulse is to correct, defend, or respond. But when you resist that impulse, something subtle happens. You stop feeding the situation. And when a situation is not fed, it loses momentum. Many conflicts survive only because both sides continue to react. Remove one reaction, and the structure begins to collapse. Not immediately, but inevitably. This is where real strength becomes visible. Because anyone can speak under pressure. Anyone can defend themselves when provoked. But not everyone can do nothing when everything inside them demands action. That ability to do nothing when everything suggests otherwise is not passivity. It is discipline operating at a higher level. And people feel it, even if they cannot explain it. They sense the difference between someone who is emotionally driven and someone who is emotionally unavailable for manipulation. The latter creates discomfort in those who rely on predictable responses because they cannot anchor their behavior in you anymore. You stop being part of their emotional system, and you become something else, an observer. a presence that does not easily shift. And when that happens, respect is no longer requested, it is generated. But there is still one final realization that ties everything together. The entire structure of power, reaction, silence, and control leads to a single point. True power is not about reaction at all. It is about mastery. The power that is born from control. At the end of everything, the real question was never about what happens to you. It was always about what happens inside you. Because life will continue to provoke you. People will continue to test you. Situations will continue to challenge your patience, your ego, your identity. That will not stop. It was never supposed to stop. What must change is not the world around you, but the way you respond to it. Most people live in a constant state of reaction. They are pulled by every comment, every opinion, every moment of tension. They believe they are participating in life, but in reality, they are being moved by it. Emotion becomes their compass. Impulse becomes their direction. And slowly, without noticing, they lose control of their own presence. But there is another way. A way where you do not react immediately. Where you do not expose every thought, every emotion, every internal disturbance. A way where silence is not emptiness, but choice. Where pause is not weakness, but intelligence in motion. Seneca writes in Letters to Lucilius, letter 47, that no man is more unhappy than he who never learns to endure himself. And endurance here is not suffering. It is mastery over the internal response that tries to escape discomfort through immediate action. Because every time you react without thinking, you are escaping yourself. You are avoiding the tension of control. You are choosing release over awareness. But power is never found in release. It is found in restraint. When you stop reacting to everything, something fundamental changes. You begin to observe instead of collapse into emotion. You begin to choose instead of obey. You begin to respond from clarity, not pressure. And people notice, not because you announce it, not because you explain it, but because your energy becomes different. Your presence becomes harder to shake. Your reactions become rare, measured, intentional, and rarity creates authority. Robert Greene emphasizes across his works that power is often defined not by what you do, but by what others cannot make you do. And when your reactions are no longer accessible on demand, you become difficult to position, difficult to influence, difficult to destabilize. You are no longer part of the emotional game. You are above it, and this is where real respect begins to form. Not the forced respect that comes from fear or dominance, but the natural respect that emerges when people realize they cannot control your emotional direction. Because in a world where everyone reacts, the one who does not becomes immediately noticeable. And ultimately, this is the core truth behind everything you have seen here. Power is not about reacting better. It is about reacting less and choosing more. The moment you understand that, you stop being a reflection of the world around you, and you start becoming the one who defines how you respond to it. And that changes everything. Now the question is not what others will do next. The question is what you will allow yourself to respond to.